Welcome back, Giant Growers. It's Chris Brown, Garden of Giants YouTube channel, and it is mid-June. What does that mean? Love is in the air. It is pollination season. This is the time of year where we pollinate our giant pumpkins in hopes of the next 100 days growing them to 1,000, maybe even 2,000 pounds or more. Pollination is absolute key and critical to this process. You want to get an early pollination so that you can start your pumpkin off on the right foot with some nice warm weather in June, because you'd rather have it growing in June versus September where the days can get quite cold. But a lot of new growers are like, what do you mean pollination? Don't the bees do that? Yes, they do. However, in the giant growing world, we really like to control our genetics. And by controlling the genetics, we then can move towards that process of making what we believe is the perfect pumpkin. And that would be big, orange, round, and heavy to chart, real thick rind. So we kind of take the place of the bees and we do what we call a closed pollination. We will go over that today. And if you're a new grower, by all means, just simply let the bees pollinate your fruit. Remember, pollination does not affect the current plant and fruit's outcome. It has nothing to do with it. You could pollinate it with a 1-pound squash and it will do nothing. You could still grow a 2,000-pound pumpkin. It's only the seeds inside that pumpkin for next year that would be affected by the pollen you do this year. So myth one, the pollination does not affect anything with current year's growth. Now the reason we do a closed pollination, and that means covering up the female flower, taking the male flowers inside for the night so that no pollinator will touch it. We do this because you never know if that bee flies over to Miss Johnson's patch and she's growing the world's smallest pumpkin and brings back that pollen and then pollinates it into yours. And if you're trying for a fruit that's maybe big, heavy to chart, orange, round, whatever the traits you're trying to go after, you will not achieve that with an open pollination. First off, you have no idea where the pollen came from, so you have no way to track it. In the giant growing world, we have pedigrees and lineages, family trees. We can actually look back generation after generation after generation, grandparent, great-grandparent, and we can see where these pumpkins came from. We can see the traits, the genetics that were, 5 or 6 generations back. It's quite interesting to really look at that and see the progression. In the 1980s, just 40 years ago, we were sitting at 400 pounds, 480 pounds, 470 pounds for the world record. But because of people like Howard Dill and others who started doing closed pollinations, controlling the genetics, we have moved that pumpkin from a world record under 500 pounds to now over 2,700 pounds officially. And last year at 2,907 pounds, the Patton brothers over in the UK had almost broken that 3,000 pound barrier. So very exciting, and it all comes back to love in the pumpkin patch. So let's show you how we do some pollination. Giant growers, welcome back. This is Chris, Garden of Giants, and we are about to do a pollination. This is Ruby, the 1461 Rotabaugh. We have a flower that is going to open tomorrow. You can tell by that slight orange hue. On any pumpkin, especially ones you think will be very beautiful like this, always a great idea to use a bamboo skewer to hold the stalk away from the baby pumpkin. You do not want these touching. They touch, they scratch, the whole pumpkin is scratched up for its entire life. So you do not want that. That's first tip number one. So let's get into the proper way and the best way, I believe, that you can do a pollination. First, you want to be redundant in your protection against outside pollinations, namely bees, flies, other pollinators. They will do anything and everything they can to get in. So I'll use a chip clip. I'll put it right over the top like that. That will 100% keep that flower closed. But it's not foolproof, because bees that are hungry and different bugs, even cucumber beetles, will chew their way through there. So how do you prevent that? Well, you put a baggie over it. They can't see a nice orange flower, they will never even come to investigate. And that is pro tip number 2. And then what I do is, it's very, very windy tonight, so what I will do is I will put this around the base, so essentially tying it shut. Oops. And what that'll do is that'll prevent it from any pollinator getting in there and trying to ruin my perfect pollinations. Oops, sorry. All right, so now that this is covered, we need some male flowers. I am not going to self this. I'm going to cross it with another really beautiful orange pumpkin. Let's find out which one. All right, giant growers, we are back, and we have found some males on the 1552 young. Very beautiful orange pumpkin, very perfect shape. I want to cross that with ruby. See if we can't just make an ultra red orange pumpkin. So what we have to do is we have to look around here, and we have to see if we can find some males that are about ready to open. So let's take a look here. I see one right there. And you can tell because of that orange hue that it's going to open tomorrow. So we're going to grab that one. I see one right there. Looks like there's one right here too. And there's one right here. My goal is to get about 5 males. And then what we'll do is we'll have plenty of males to then pollinate the female tomorrow. I see another one right back there. So we're golden. Now, how do I get them? The ones close to me obviously are easy, but the ones further away, I have this nifty little tool that, as you guys can see, will grab the flowers for me so that I don't have to walk into the plant to get them. I can just reach with my trusty little lopper with a little claw on it to hold it, and then I can take the flower and transfer it into the cup. Now it's very, very important that they're marked. You need to know what pollen is what. Everything going in here is going to be the 1552. So let's grab the rest here. And this one is really far back there. We'll see if we can grab it. I got it. Let's see. Success. All right. Perfect. There's 4. We need at least 1 more. Like I said, I like to do 5 unless I'm forced otherwise. Another thing I like to do is I like to get them, as you can see, the sun just went down. I like to get them right, if possible, if I'm not working, right at dusk. That way they are given the fullest potential to maturity on the vine, and they will then, just with the water in the cup, complete their entire maturity and opening tomorrow without any ill effect. All right, let's get 1 more here and we will call it a night. We'll go put these inside and we will get ready for tomorrow morning, bright and early. A nice early pollination. Earlier is better. Now, the one drawback to tomorrow is that it is going to be 42 degrees for an overnight low. So tomorrow we have the reverse of what we usually deal with, and that's we usually deal with too much heat. I'm going to have too much in the way of cool weather. However, a perfect pollination, I believe, takes place right around that 70-degree mark. So what that means is, even though we're starting cool, I'll get everything pollinated, and throughout the day we should warm into the mid-70s. That does cross that kind of that perfect pollination temperature, and because it crosses that, the pollen will be on there. It should be a successful pollination, but you always get a little nervous when it's too cold or obviously too hot. But we'll see you all in the morning. All right, good morning, giant growers. We have the bag off of Ruby. It's a cold morning. It's about 48 degrees, 7 a.m. It got down to about 41, maybe 42. You can tell Ruby here is a little cold, doesn't even want to open, but let's take a look. Like a nice 6 lober in there. 2, 4, 6, I'm thinking. All right, well, let's do some pollination. All right, so how we'll do it is we will take the male and pull it down to where we can take, just go right along the base there. All right, now you have a paintbrush. This paintbrush is loaded with pollen. See all that pollen? You can see. All right, now simply gonna paint it onto the lobes of the flower. All right, giant growers, let's show you one more pollination here. This is the 2365 Wolf. It is June 13th, 2023. We last night covered the female flower up, like I always do, with both the chip clip and the lunch bag. we had secured some male flowers. Those male flowers are actually off my 2069 Stelz plant. My entire kind of goal or concept behind this is obviously the 2365 has been proven to get very large, upwards of 2,500 pounds, and generally heavy to chart. The 2069 is the 1953 Deletus times the 2350 Ginger. So what that does is the 1953 Deletus went heavy to chart, which is what we like. So we have 2365, generally heavy to chart. The 1953 went heavy to chart. The 2350 Ginger, or Tiger King, generally produces a beautiful orange. So by adding some of the best genetics in the world with what I consider an anomaly, the 1953 going both orange and heavy with a Tiger King crossed into it, I think this is a match made in heaven for producing a potential of big and orange. So let's get to it as the blue jays are squawking away out in the woods there. All right, so let's pull this off. What I always like to do, as you guys can see, is, well, maybe you can't quite see, but I like to keep a little bamboo skewer. Let's see if you can see this here. See how there's that gap between the pumpkin and the leaf stalk? If I have to, I will cut that leaf stalk off. But by keeping that gap there, it ensures that the pumpkin does not get scratched. There's not much of a gap, but there is enough of a gap. Like I said, I may just take this off. As you guys can see, this pumpkin here was actually, and I just left it open pollinated. I wanted to see if it would take, but it was on a very cold morning a few days ago. It was like 41, 42 degrees. That one will be cut off. I'm just leaving it there, but it will be cut off. This is the one I'm going with. It's about 13 feet out, 22, 23 secondaries behind it. As you can see, a pretty nice plant. But let's take a look at it. What do we got here? Ooh, that looks nice. 2, 4, 5. 5 lobe. And to be honest with you, that looks like about as perfect as you can get for symmetry. So let's pollinate this up. All right, real quick, I wanted to show you guys how to take a male flower and open it up properly for pollination. You essentially want to turn it into a paintbrush. So just going to rip right down, and do this very gently, because remember, you got a lot of pollen on there. You'll rip it right down to the base, and then you'll just go right along that base here, this base right there. Just go right along, very gently, very slowly. And now you have a paintbrush loaded with pollen. See all that pollen on there? All right, let's do some painting. All right, so we're going to take the paintbrush with the pollen, and we're simply going to paint each lobe. All right, I think that looks pretty good. We cake the pollen on really, really heavy, as you can see. Now remember, 1 grain of pollen can start the entire process to grow a giant pumpkin. So a pumpkin can have anywhere from 1 seed to 1,000 seeds. Average more like 300, maybe 400 seeds. But each grain of pollen will turn into a seed. And it depends, obviously. Now this pumpkin could have just 1 seed in it, because each pollen, due to environmental factors, temperature, humidity, so forth, those pollens now have to create the pumpkin, or have to fertilize the pumpkin. So if it fertilizes okay, I should get, I've obviously, you see I caked the lobes in pollen. It's just, it is thick. So, and it is 62 degrees out. So the hope is that we have a very successful pollination here. It looks very good. But let's get this flower closed up, and we don't want the bees, who are probably moving around, we don't want them to come over and into the flower. So what we'll do is we will wrap this back up. And we'll put the bag back over it.